In a perfect world, we'd move to France, study French just a little bit, and magically just pick up the language by being immersed in it, and then speak perfect French 2 weeks later, right? Just like a native. Yeah, no, sorry, it just doesn't work like that. Language learning is a journey. It's definitely not a linear one. And you'll have good days and a bunch of bad ones along the way. That's normal. That's how it goes. But today, let's talk about people who forego that process entirely. I'm talking about foreigners who move to France but never learn the language beyond a very basic level. So let's talk about it. All right, bonjour tout le monde. Welcome back to We in France. I'm Diane, and first, I want to provide some context for this topic, but if you don't want to hear any of that, you just want to get directly into my list of 9 things, I'll put the timestamp here or here, just so you could skip ahead to that mark. But the context is important, so I want to start there. Now, for me, growing up in New Jersey, I knew people all around me, between teachers, friends, family, who had parents or even grandparents who were not born in the US, moved stateside in the years prior, but spoke very little, if any, English. I had a coworker whose parents were from Cuba, and because they moved to a Cuban neighborhood in Miami, they never learned English. They could get by and live their life in Spanish, completely, entirely in Spanish. And maybe you have people in your life that fall into this category as well. I recently heard of another example that kind of inspired this video over on Instagram from bilingual French-English comedian Tati McLeod. She was born to a British mom. She grew up in France. And despite the fact that her mother has been living in the Brittany region for 30-ish years, Tati explained in a recent reel that I'll link down below if you want to watch it, that her mom does not speak French, like beyond the very basics. And the comedian spoke out defending her mom after receiving a bunch of critical comments about her mom's lack of language skills, critical comments, as you do. Tati's mom, though, she is far from the only foreigner who moved to France and doesn't speak French. I want to say up front, I am not here to judge anyone's choices and abilities. I wouldn't want anyone to judge mine, so that's not what this is about. Whether you learn a foreign language or not, and to what level, that is entirely your prerogative. So no judgment. Our life experiences, as well as our own wants and needs, they're not the same. So there are very valid reasons, even if you might disagree, but there are very valid reasons why someone might move abroad and not learn the language. I personally feel, just an aside, I feel we all need to live our own lives, do what's best for ourselves and our loved ones, and just be less concerned overall with what other people do in general. Like when it really comes down to it, right? It's all fun to talk and to joke around, but I don't think it's fair to blindly label someone as arrogant or lazy just because they don't learn a language somewhere. And for the record, personally speaking, I have fallen into some of the ways of thinking that I'm going to mention in this video. Along the way, you feel different ways. It's human to have feelings, and especially when you start something new and it's scary. And what I talk about, it doesn't just apply to learning French. It has nothing to do with just France, but that's the point of view I take on this channel. So that's where I'm coming from. And just to give you background on me, in case you're new here, personally speaking, I made a choice to learn French. My husband is French, and I personally feel I've had a much richer experience in France because I do speak French. And I suspect that many of you guys out there who learn French, or the language of the country you live in, that your life is also richer because of that. You have independence, which is important to me.
How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
And I made it a priority to learn fluent French. Now, has it been easy? No, not by a long shot, but it has been worth it. And if you're wondering, do I speak perfect French? Absolutely not. And sometimes I regress when I'm nervous. Could I have been more diligent along the way? Heck yes. Would I speak better French if I studied French in college? Absolutely. But you never know where life's going to take you. I studied Irish, true story. And do I have a lot to learn? Always. Now, all of that aside, I've managed to be self-reliant here in France. I can communicate my wants, my needs, interact with the world around me, which is big. And I'm certainly proud of how far I've come with that. And especially if you live in a smaller town like I do, you need to speak French because you're not going to find all these English speakers. Speaking French, it is a necessity in my day-to-day life. So I'm glad that I put in the time, and I will continue to do that. But that said, I fully acknowledge some people do not learn the language beyond the basics for whatever reason, and they go on to live perfectly happy lives. So, it really just depends on the person and their situation. And now I want to get into my list of 9 reasons why someone might move to France and not learn French beyond the very basics. All right, number 1, because it is hard and scary. Yes, Yes, I'm starting with this one right off the bat. It is hard. I will not sugarcoat that. Throwing yourself right into language learning in a new country, that is not for the faint of heart. And it's all fun and games when you take language lessons once a week for fun in your home country, or use an app when you feel like it, in the comfort of a friendly learning situation. But when you need to learn a language out of necessity, it can be even more challenging, and it can really mess with your sense of self. You feel like a child. One really common thing that happens is that you become easily overwhelmed. There's so much coming at you fast and hard, especially in do or die situations, where you have to make yourself understood and you're struggling, and then the panic settles in. The whole bakery is looking at you. There's a whole line behind you as you kind of fumble your way through ordering. When I felt overwhelmed before, I've taken a break, and that has really helped. And if you identify with this point, maybe you feel like it's just an uphill battle. You're never making any progress. You're always losing steam. There's always more to learn. You get tired of never understanding. You're always feeling worn down. You just aren't making progress. So you give up and you learn to get by at your current level. And maybe you're also scared of looking dumb and looking stupid to others. So you do everything in English, and that's where you are. All right, number 2, you don't feel like yourself or very self-assured. And if you're someone who normally feels in control, you enjoy that about yourself. You pride yourself on being on top of things, not only in your home life, but in your professional life, in your community. This one's going to resonate. You're someone who throughout your entire life, people have known you as someone who has it together. You're someone who's quick, on the ball, you get things done. But all that went out the window when you tried to learn French. You're like a fish out of water. This is new for you. And you just don't feel like yourself in French. You definitely are self-conscious, you doubt yourself, and you maybe even doubt your move abroad because it's that hard. And every time you speak French, it feels foreign to you. You don't feel confident, and that's a new thing for you. And you definitely don't know what other people are saying to you or behind your back. You're convinced it's something bad, and it just makes you feel deeply unsettled, a feeling that is new again. You've decided that you're more comfortable in English, you're not going to learn French at all, and it is so uncomfortable to you that you'd rather avoid French entirely because the process is messing with your very secure sense of self. And maybe you even double down and seek out more English-speaking friends, activities, you stay in a big city, you do English-speaking things because that's where you're comfortable. All right, number 3, your ego takes a hit, and this one goes hand in hand with what I just said above. Our egos can be fragile, and if we're a type A person who is maybe well-educated, successful, you're social, and you take pride in that, again, in your home country, it is a major blow to your ego to be knocked down a few notches in France. You can easily slip into feeling less than. You get down on yourself. You feel like you don't belong, that you don't even matter, that no one cares. And stumbling around in French isn't comfortable, and it is not cute to make mistakes. As a 16-year-old exchange student, maybe, but it's less so as a full-grown adult. You want others to take you seriously, especially for someone who is so well-respected at home. And because of this, you have zero motivation. You've convinced yourself that where you are is fine, even though that type A personality hates that you aren't pushing yourself to be better, and that's just where you are, and that's where you're going to stay unless you make a change. All right, number 4, you've tried and failed too many times. And yes, I put failed in quotes. So for this one, maybe you're worn down, maybe you're sad, maybe you just can't bring yourself to get back on the horse, so to speak. You just feel like you've fallen off so many times that you reach this point where you think, what the heck is the point? I don't even see the point anymore. And you've embarrassed yourself a lot. You kind of focus and fixate on that. You've just failed one too many times for your liking. You're ashamed. Maybe you've internalized that shame. I also know of people who have experienced childhood trauma of some sort, and they were shamed as a kid or a young adult. And like language learning, it stirs up all of those old feelings of trauma and being shamed. So I want to put that out there as well. So whatever the reason, you just don't feel you're cut out for this, and you've convinced yourself that it's a you problem. But honestly, this is why I put failed in quotes. You haven't failed if you haven't given up. It's a process. And if you're still trying, you have not failed. Hear that, please. If people are rude to you and you feel like you failed or they've mocked you, your accent, that is their ignorance. I want to be clear about that. You haven't done anything wrong by trying. That's a them problem. And I just want to make a little PS. There were comments from foreigners on Taddy's post, the comedian I mentioned in my intro, that said the French have been rude to them for attempting to speak French. You know, they were ridiculed for opening their mouth in this less than perfect French, for making mistakes, whatever. Now, most French people, I feel they are happy to encounter someone speaking their language, or at least trying, and will not treat you poorly because you aren't perfect. That said, in a tourism capacity, if you're trying to practice your French with a busy waiter, maybe they'll be a little brusque with you, but anyone with half a brain cell can acknowledge your effort and not be nasty about it. I don't think that's a particularly French trait. Of course, there are nasty people out there, but I want to be clear about this. If anyone has made you feel this way, that's projection. That is them projecting their own shortcomings onto you, and it's not a you problem. I want to encourage you to keep doing you, keep trying. I know how defeating that can feel, but I assure you the vast, vast majority of French people do not act this way towards foreigners speaking French, so don't let that hold you back. All right, number 5, you've convinced yourself that you're too busy, too tired, too old, too bad at languages, or whatever. If you truly want to learn French, you need to look at all those things as excuses. You might not be able to achieve a perfectly bilingual level, but you could definitely improve on wherever you currently are. And I want to acknowledge that the stories we tell ourselves, they can be so damaging. And if you tell yourself something enough, you're going to start believing it. So watch out, watch the way you speak to yourself, because once we've internalized this negative self-talk around anything, but in this case, learning a language, we trick ourselves into feeling like it is the reality, and it's not. And once you're stuck in your beliefs, it is nearly impossible to move forward. So just be careful with the things you tell yourself. And sure, I'll also acknowledge that learning French at age 70 is going to be more difficult than at age 3. But we can all make progress wherever we are, whatever that looks like to you. Baby steps, one foot in front of the other. So whether that's learning 2 new vocab words a week, a new grammar rule, whatever. Take it at your own pace. Don't keep telling yourself lies, and definitely don't sell yourself short. All right, number 6, you don't need French because your entire life is in English. Maybe you live in a big city like Paris where you can find enough English speakers or a foreign community to get by, or you live in an area just where your workplace, your colleagues, acquaintances, they all either speak English or they're from an English-speaking country, so the default language is English, and you've carved out a life for yourself that doesn't require you to speak French at all. All right, number 7, you rely on your French-speaking partner or a close friend for everything. Now, if you move to France for love, maybe your partner handles all of the phone calls, all of the conversations, ordering at a restaurant for you. And I think in my case, my first few months in France, that was what I was doing. Tom would handle everything. I mean, the only word I think I would say in public was bonjour. Otherwise, I was mute. And it was because I was scared. I was scared to open my mouth and look dumb, so I let Tom do all the talking, and I wasn't doing myself any favors. And truth be told, I was also a little lazy with learning French because I knew Tom would swoop in to save the day when I needed him, and he did. But would I have been more serious about learning French from day one if it were a necessity? Yes, probably. So I just want you to realize what role someone is playing or not playing in your life if you do have a close friend or partner who is the native speaker. And that's one reason why people might not learn French or not as quickly. Just putting it out there. All right, number 8, a learning disability or deficit that makes learning a language more difficult. Now, there are different types of learning deficits, other health conditions that might make learning a language more difficult. There are people with neurological problems, different processing disorders, dyslexia. I'm not an expert in this field, but those things exist and I want to validate them. Not all language learning methods are appropriate or suited for every person. Not every teacher is going to be able to work with students who have different needs or people who are differently abled. So keep that in mind too when you see someone out on the street who doesn't speak French. All right, number 9, something I see a lot and something maybe is the most important to talk about. People are in love with the idea of France and the French lifestyle, but they aren't willing to go deeper. And I think living a stereotypical life like you see on TV shows like Emily in Paris, that's not real life. It is playing house, and you certainly don't need to learn French to play a game like that. But maybe going deeper is something to consider, and I have a personal stance on this. I get emails from people all the time, messages from people telling me they love France, they were here on vacation, they're enamored with the country, they want to move here, but they don't speak French, and they actually aren't interested in learning it. And they write because they want to know if they'll be okay without speaking French. Like they want me to validate their choice in that. And I always tread very gently, but I tell people that in some areas of France, sure, you can get by with basic French, or find people who speak enough English, but that's certainly not the case everywhere, and that they should start learning now. Ask yourself, why would you want to come to France and move somewhere and be socially isolated and not learn the language of the country. I think for many of us, we come to France with a low level of French or a level that we thought was higher than it was, and that'll be a reality for a while. You won't really be able to speak well, but do everything in your power to go beyond the surface, or you're going to be holding yourself back. And I feel if you really do love France and you're enamored with the place, if your goal is to truly understand France and make real connections with the culture, the people, and make a life for yourself, you have to have a decent grasp of the language. Otherwise, you'll always be on the outside looking in. And the way I think of it is, even if the view is pretty, if you can only admire something from afar, is it worth it? I mean, I didn't come to France for the view, and I think it can be really damaging when you don't realize you've been living life on the sidelines until you've been there the entire season. So that brings me to my next point. What the heck can we do about it if we've kind of fallen victim at one point, or maybe now you're in it to one of my 9 reasons? I want to just say, first, start where you are. Acknowledge where you are. It doesn't matter if you're 18, 80, outside those. Ignore people who say it's impossible to learn language as an adult. Naysayers don't matter. If you're alive, you're capable of improving. So let the past go. Let those mental blocks go. Focus on where you are now and where you're going forward. Because I speak from experience, dwelling on your past mistakes and overthinking, that will just hold you back. And you and me, we deserve better. So if you truly want to learn French, you've been sidetracked by one of the reasons I've mentioned, don't give up on yourself. While it's not pretty, struggling through it, it is all part of the process. I told you about that. I've been there. You're there. You will be there. You will also make it to the other side. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's when you'll kind of have to just make peace with the situation. You'll feel lighter. And that's a good thing. You're going to get through it. So stay where you are, keep pushing through. And the feelings, do they ever dissipate completely? I still feel uncomfortable at times, but things will get better. I promise you that. You'll make progress. And that's what it's about. Progress over perfection. Let the idea of perfection go. And I know it's scary as hell, really. I can't underline that enough. And I would argue that a lot of what might be holding you back, because it's what held me back and still does some days, if you deep down do want to be proficient in French, it's fear. Fear is what is holding you back, because we fear failure, all the stuff I talked about. We fear judgment and critique, fear looking dumb, making a fool out of ourselves, embarrassing ourselves, and that list, it just goes on and on. So it's easier to stay where we are. Most days I don't care at all what people think, but some days I do, even over a decade into this little dog and pony show here in France, so your feelings are valid with that. And here are just a few tips I have. It's going to be brutal, but you need to get real with yourself. Figure out if you're really fine with learning French, and if you truly want to learn, stop making excuses. Are you really bad at languages, or is that just a lie you tell yourself? Are you really scared? Have you honestly put in the work though? Just ask yourself these questions. Next, make an investment in your learning. I found that if you're paying for something, you're going to put in the time and you're going to put in the work because you don't want to waste your money. So whether that's a private language teacher, a language school, an online program, or some kind of service on your phone, whatever it is, if it's costing you, you're more likely to stay disciplined and keep showing up. All right, next, I want you to go the route that makes the most sense for your personality, for your goals, your budget, and for your available time. So maybe an intense 5-day-a-week class, it's too much for you. Or 2-hour lessons make you tune out. Or you hate apps on your phone because everything's so small. Figure out what works for your learning style and then pursue that. I just want to say, to wrap this up, I am not saying the reasons I just mentioned are inherently right or wrong. Again, no judgment. I truly mean that. I am just sharing reasons that have personally held me back from learning French along the way, as well as reasons I've heard from other people that I've met over the years. So that's just where I'm coming from with this video. I also want to say, for anyone out there who feels overwhelmed by learning French right now, I want you to hang in there. I know it is hard. I know you're doing the best you can. I can feel that. I know you are. And I just want you to know that it's enough. You're enough. And if you want to learn and improve your French, it's always going to be there to welcome you with open arms. So just stay the course. Keep doing what you're doing. Make the changes that you need to make. I just want to hear from you in the comments if you can relate to anything I said, maybe other reasons I didn't even get into. I just want to reiterate, please don't judge people. Don't be a dick, basically, in the comments, because I know this kind of topic can hit home and be really emotional for people, especially someone who might be struggling and they feel held back by being in France. Maybe it wasn't their choice to come. And I just know when I have felt a little more emotional or fragile, it can really hurt to get comments that really aren't kind. So I'm just asking you, if you do choose to comment, please be open-minded and a bit empathetic, if you wouldn't mind. As always on this channel, but I'm asking you specifically, if you choose to comment, do it with kindness. And with that, I'll see you back on We in France soon. Salut!